So I'm actually really glad to see a whole bunch of people that I know from literally far and wide, people from Dallas, people from Los Angeles. I see actually one of my clients, a few of my clients on here. Thank you. It's so glad that you were able to join us today. Just so that you're aware, the particular flow of this session is a little bit different than some of the other sessions that we typically do, primarily because the way this is structured, there needs to be a flow from start to finish so that you understand the process. So what I'm going to ask everybody to do is, if you do have questions, I want to encourage you, don't forget the questions, but if you could put the questions in the chat and I'll come to those questions at the end as much as I possibly can, given the time. We're having there we go. So as I mentioned, this is going to be recorded, or it is currently recording. It's going to be appearing on my YouTube channel as well as on my podcast, which is ryansruminations.com. There are a whole bunch of podcasts there on a whole variety of topics, some short, some longer, and I definitely encourage you to listen there as well. So let's jump right in and start talking about moves management. So, as many of you know, there are two components to a fundraising operation. There's what we call donor-focused relationship building, which is really very much focused on major donors, your bigger donors. And by the way, for each individual organization, a major donor is going to have a slightly different definition. So for some donors, you may have, some organizations, a $10,000 gift may be considered a major gift. For others, it's significantly larger. So it really depends on each individual organization. Anybody who is not a major donor will become what we call a transactional donor and will fall under a transactional campaign bucket, which means everybody else other than your major donors, and they're handled a little bit differently because of that, which again, part of this is we're going to discuss and explore. When it comes to our major donors, this is what moves management is designed for. And what it does is it really formalizes and standardizes our campaign efforts and our connections with those major donors. What that means, by the way, is as far as your development team is concerned, there may be some slightly altered roles that many of them may have. Your office staff may be doing things a little bit differently in order to really achieve success with your major donors compared to everybody else who's considered transactional. And again, we're going to be discussing all of this as we go along. But one of the things that we're going to learn through moves management is who our donors are, not only the small ones or the big ones, but also the small ones, which is obviously very, very important as well. And ultimately, what moves management is going to allow us to do is to focus our campaigns that much more strategically to move forward. So what exactly can you expect from a moves management system, which we're going to be describing today? First of all, an increase in overall fundraising, because you're far more focused on your major donors. You're not running around figuring out who your major donors are. The system is designed to hone in on who those major donors are from the get-go. It will also increase the number of major donors, because you're now able to look at people from a slightly different perspective using the scoring system, which I'm going to explain again in a handful of slides. And then ultimately, it's going to increase the average size of your gift. In reality, it's going to give you the ability to ultimately increase the size of the gifts from your donors, because you're using such a methodical and strategic method in order to approach your major donors. So you're asking yourselves, what exactly is moves management? I can hear it. I can hear it all over the internet. You guys are wondering this question in your minds. So let's explore what it is. First and foremost, it is donor-centered development. It's not campaign-based. Yes, campaigns will form a part of it. You're going to have a dinner campaign, and your major donors will be a part of your dinner, etc. But it is not specifically campaign-based. That's the first thing to realize. The other thing to realize is that it's designed exclusively for your major donors. A donor who's giving $50 or $100, that's wonderful, and you certainly appreciate it. That does not make a major donor. So this concept does not apply to anybody but your major donors. The next thing to realize is that moves management really is a strategy that's designed to convert a major gift prospect, not only into a major gift donor, but more importantly, a committed major gift donor. And because there's that commitment, you're ultimately over time going to be able to steward that donor to first maintain their gift, and ultimately over time, even increase their gift as well. Something that is crucially important to realize when it comes to moves management is that you will be designing and creating an individual strategy. I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to be doing with 2 individual donors down the line, but it is highly specific and designed for each individual donor, not for an entire campaign. If I could ask everybody to please mute, by the way, it's some sounds are coming through. Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of what moves management is. So we have to look at the 5 R's, the 5 keys of major gift solicitation. Most of us know them, but let's go through them again. We need the right donor being approached by the right solicitor for the right amount of money, for the right campaign, and the campaign in this situation means moves management campaign, although it could be in project as well, at the right time. Right donor approached by the right solicitor for the right gift, for the right project at the right time. And all these are crucial. Once you have all 5 of these components in place, you're able to do a major gift solicitation. And that's where move management is absolutely pivotal in helping you reach that. Now, moves management is divided into 2 components. The first component is identifying and qualifying the right donors. Identification and qualification. That's your first step. Cannot do anything else without that. Once you've identified and qualified those individual donors, you're then going to move on to stage 2, which is cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship of those donors. And it is a very, very well thought out process. It's incredibly deliberate. It's incredibly methodical. And it's because of that strategic approach that moves management is successful in the long run. So moves management has a revolution, and we're going to go through what that revolution is. Essentially, it has 6 primary steps. The first we already covered, identifying your pool of potential major donors. You've got to identify them. Each donor has then got to be qualified with a score, which we're going to be coming up to in a couple of slides. We're then going to be developing we're going to be cultivating each donor based on a plan and a strategy in order to maximize the connection, the relationships, and the time that we're spending with these major donors. We don't want to spend a huge amount of time with a donor who's going to be giving us $100. We certainly want to spend time with them, but we're not going to be spending the same amount of time with them as we would be spending with a donor who, let's say, is a $5, $10, or $100,000 donor. And that's something obviously I know makes sense to all of you. Next, we're going to be soliciting them. Now, we're not going to be discussing this solicitation in great detail today because that's an entire webinar in and of itself, but obviously something very, very important. We're then going to be thanking them. As a matter of fact, I did a webinar with Dave Lynn, the gratitude dude, this past November on gratitude, but thanking them can never, ever be overemphasized. This is something that's important and hugely important. And then the final step is starting from the beginning again. And you're going to be doing this from year to year. So our first step is really to identify who our pool is of major donors. And these can form people from multiple different walks of life. Obviously, your current donors and prospects are people that you should be looking at. Prior donors and supporters, they gave a couple of years ago but haven't given again, ask yourselves why. They may have given for a dinner, for an honoree, and the chances of getting a gift from them again are minimal, but you never know. You have to think about that, and you have to look at who they are to figure out if there's a possibility of getting a gift again. Board members. I cannot tell you how often organizations forget about board members. Board members are donors just like everybody else. They need that support. They need that connection. They need that hand-holding that moves management often brings. But we have to ask ourselves a question. Do they qualify for moves management? We'll find out in a couple of slides. Every one of you, I know for sure, has community members that you would love to go to solicit for a gift, but you may not necessarily know how. what moves management does is gives you that ability to look at those names, start figuring out a strategy in order to approach those individual donors. Connections of board members. This is another, it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Board members often feel, well, I'm on the board, I'm here to give advice. No, board members are also there to offer wealth, wisdom, and frankly, roll up their sleeves and work. But part of their role is really to connect you with other potential donors. So these are all the various types of people that form your prospect pool. And obviously, you have to think in your individual situation, your individual organizations, who your prospects are, because they will differ slightly depending on the type of organization. So now let's move on to donor qualification. So I mentioned before that each donor has to be scored individually. And that's something we're actually going to be coming up to in literally 2 slides, so patience. And crucially important, once you have scored those donors, you're then going to be setting an individual goal for each donor. And that will make your perfect donor. Scoring your donor, setting your goals for the donor, and this will develop your perfect donor, your perfect prospect. And there are 3 components that make up the perfect prospect, the perfect donor. One is philanthropic propensity. Are they givers, not only to your organization, but to other organizations too? If you know that they give to the Salvation Army, they give to this school, they give to this synagogue, they give to that church, whatever the organization may be, you know that these are people who are philanthropic. Mission affinity is the next crucial point. Do they love your organization? What is the connection they have to your organization? If it's a parent in a school, that connection is fairly obvious. If it's a member of a church or a mosque, again, that's fairly obvious. Somebody who's a member of the community may not necessarily have that affinity to your mission. So you have to figure out exactly whether they do belong to the system at all, and they should be prospected by you. Then finally, the final piece is giving capacity. Do they have the ability to give? We're not talking about a gift of $100. We're talking about gifts of, we're talking about major gifts. And again, as I mentioned, these they differ depending on each individual organization. So philanthropic propensity, your mission affinity, and your capacity to give are the crucial points that center where those 3 points meet. That is your perfect prospect. So now we've put all our lists of all our prospects together. We've gone through looking at the various prospects individually to try and figure out where they belong. But we're struggling here. We haven't put this all together to figure out which one of these people, which of this group are your major gift donors, and which of them will fall into your moves management system. And this is where our scoring process comes into place. And I want to give a special shout out. He's not on the webinar today, but Rabbi Yaakov Cohen, he actually devised this particular component, which I absolutely loved. He gave permission to use it. So therefore I am using it. But I want to run through, this is where a lot of what we're talking about in moves management really comes into play. So we spoke about propensity to give, we spoke about affinity, we spoke about capacity. All those components are going to be going into the scoring process, as you'll see here. So the first question you have to ask yourself, for each individual donor, is the prospect a current donor? If they currently give to your organization, that's something huge. That's something really, really important. They get a score of 10. Has this prospect made a major gift pledge or donation recently? That's going to score them anywhere between 5 and 30 points. Let's say a donor is, your minimum qualification for a major gift is $5,000. And a donor made a donation just last week for $5,000. You're not necessarily going to score them at a 30 because you have other major gifts of $100, $250, $1 million. So that particular donor who just gave you $5,000, which is a wonderful gift, is not necessarily going to score the same as a donor who's giving significantly more. So that's why there's a range there you'll see from 5 to 30. Has the donor donated in the past number of years? That earns 5 points. Has the donor given consecutively for 5 years? It doesn't have to be 5 years, it could be 3 years. But what you want to see is a donor that's given fairly consistently, because if they're given consistently, again, they're showing an affinity to your organization, which is obviously very, very important. Long-term commitments as well. That shows your organization that this is a donor who loves you. This is a donor who wants to be a part of what you're doing. So that also earns 5 points. Capacity. Obviously, capacity, we all know that's huge. There are donors who a $5,000 gift is a wonderful gift for your organization, but that is their max. They're not giving $5,000 to any other organization. You are it. That donor is not necessarily going to score a much higher score because they don't necessarily have the capacity to give 10, 15, 20, 50, $100,000. On the flip side, you'll have donors who have significant capacity. When they write out a check for $5, $10, $100,000 to your organization, we're also writing out checks for $100,000 to multiple other organizations. So the capacity there is huge, which means they would score significantly higher. Is the prospect a member? Are they part of your organization already? That earns 5 points. Are they connected to your organization somehow, to somebody else? A board member. In a school, it could be a grandparent, any number of things. Again, that's an additional 5 points. Are they a former member? Alumni for schools, by the way, huge. That earns 5 points automatically because admittedly, alumni sometimes have come with a little bit of baggage. We know that in schools. But again, that earns a score. Board members also, again, crucially important. Do not forget your board members. That really is something important. Then the final piece is the hunch. We're going to be talking a little bit more in a couple of slides about what the hunch means. But what the hunch does is it really gives you the ability to say, you know what, there's a donor, his score isn't that particularly high, but you know what, I have a feeling about him. This gives you the ability to give a couple of scores, a couple of points to that donor just out of that hunch that you feel that they could give. On the flip side, you may have a donor who has phenomenal scores. They're scoring 80 or 90, but there's just something about them that says to you, you know what, this donor's not going to give. I just have this feeling, you know, we shouldn't be spending a huge amount of time with them. So again, various things to think about. So again, you can see that it's a scoring system out of 100, and each of your individual donors, again, that word individual, we're coming back to it, is so important for you to realize how we prospect them. Really, really important. Okay, so we've scored our individual prospects. And again, just a reminder, if everyone could please mute yourselves, that would be appreciated. Okay, so each individual prospect has been scored. Each prospect should get a line either on a Google Sheets, on Excel, whatever works for you, okay? You're gonna be putting them out. I'm gonna show you an example in a second. Most of the data, by the way, from here, has the donor given in the past, what their recent gifts are, etc., are all from your CRM. And you should be able to pull that out relatively easily and drop it into that Google Sheets or an Excel spreadsheet. You're also able to find other information about your donors, which you can certainly put into that Google spreadsheet. For example, Wealth Engine, which is a wealth screening tool. A lot of it can be anecdotal. If you find out about a particular donor from your community, etc. One of the interesting challenges, I don't know if it applies to other communities, but I found that it really does apply very often in the Jewish community. A lot of donors will give through donor advised funds or foundations. And very often, if they're giving through donor advised funds, there's no way for these wealth screening tools to actually find you because they can't put the name of the donor advised fund together with your name. So sometimes they don't necessarily always work. The next thing we're going to be doing is that we're going to be calculating our score based on this scoring system that I showed you for each individual donor. Next, we're going to, that's the simple part. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be sorting our donors from the highest score to the lowest score. That doesn't have to do with capacity. It doesn't have to do with affinity. It's got to do only with their score. So a donor who has somehow scored 100, they're at the top of your list. And a donor that scored a 10 or a 20, they're going to be at the bottom of your list. And it's fairly obvious already at this stage. The donors with the higher scores are the donors that you're really going to want to spend more time with, versus those donors who are on the lower end of the list. You're obviously not going to be spending as much time cultivating them through the moves management system. The next thing that you need to do, so you've put your list together, you've scored all your donors, you've got your entire list from top to bottom, highest scoring to lowest scoring. The next thing you have to do, and this is something that is absolutely individualized for your organization. No two organizations will be the same, that I can assure you. You need to calculate the capacity of your team members in order to handle a moves management system and a portfolio of major donors. So let's say, for example, you have 1,000 prospects on your Google Sheets, all scored from 5 all the way, or 0 all the way up to 100. 1,000 is a decent amount, especially if you only have, let's say, 3 members of a development team. There is no way, it's humanly impossible for 3 development professionals to handle 335 or so individual relationships in a portfolio. It simply cannot be done. So you have to calculate what your organization is able to handle, and the professionals within your organization, what each of them can handle. The average, and this is not carved in stone, it's a ballpark number. From what I've seen typically, most development professionals will typically handle a donor portfolio, a major donor portfolio of around 50 prospects. Now, some may be able to handle 75, some may be able to only handle 25, but they do it exceptionally well. So again, that's why I say it's individualized for each of your organizations. But you've got that list of 1,000. You have 3 development professionals, 50 each. That means that when you're looking at your list, the top 150, those are considered the major donors that you're going to be tracking with your moves management system. And everybody else, every single other donor on that list, as wonderful as they are, and they are for sure, those become transactional donors, which means they're going to be invited to the dinner, they're going to receive the various things that are typically done by the organization, but they're on autopilot. You're not necessarily focusing on specific individual relationships that need to be done for these major donors. And then again, next year, you're going to be starting the process all over again, because there are going to be donors who made a gift, and they're going to move up a level. Their gift may be bigger than they did the prior year. That moves them up. There may be donors, for whatever reason, their gift decreased, or they didn't give for whatever reason, even though they've gone through the moves management system, they didn't give. Their score is going to be lower because they've made it clear that you can't necessarily spend the amount of time with them as you necessarily would like. I mentioned the hunches earlier. Pardon me for a second. The hunch option really allows you to adjust the score based on those hunches. But what it does also, and this is something really, really valuable and important, it empowers your team. When your team understands that how the system works and why it's so incredibly important to follow the moves management system so carefully and so closely that it benefits them, by giving them that opportunity to include their own hunches, it gets buy-in. And that buy-in ultimately leads to significant more success for the moves management system and for your major donor prospecting as well. We're now going to be setting goals for each individual prospect. Okay, we've determined those 150 from that list of 1,000. We have to ask a couple of questions. How much are we going to be soliciting that individual donor for? Is it 5,000, 10,000, $1 million? That's something you have to figure out, and only you can answer that based on that donor and your organizational needs. When are you going to be soliciting them? Because you're not necessarily going to go out immediately and solicit them. The whole goal of moves management is to move them through the process, reaching towards a solicitation. It's quote unquote priming them for a solicitation. You also have to figure out what project, what campaign works for them. If they're interested in the sciences, you have to be able to project that. If they're interested in community building, there may be an aspect of your organization that deals with that. Whatever your organization does, these are projects that, again, only you can answer, but you have to define what speaks to that individual donor. And then the final piece to put in that's obviously also very, very important is who is going to be joining you when you do that solicitation. These are major donors. Best practices typically dictate that you're going to be going to meet these major donors ultimately for that solicitation with someone else. so that there's a certain camaraderie, there's a certain group. They see that you're really taking them seriously as donors, and their support of your organization you also take very, very seriously. What you're then going to be doing is you're going to be taking all the information that we put on our Google spreadsheet, all the various questions that we've answered over the last couple of minutes, who those 150 prospects are, how much you're going to be soliciting them for, when, the project, who's going to be going along, etc. All of that information then has to be put back into your CRM. If your CRM has a moves management module, wonderful. You may want to use it, you may not. Some of them work better than others. But again, something to really, give some thought to. You may have very well along the way created additional fields, hunches. I guarantee you there's no CRM that has the word hunch, the field hunch in it. They don't. You can add those fields very often, and you may need to speak to your IT department or your CRM manager in order to do that. But you're going to be importing all those fields into your CRM, and that's something, again, that's really important. If you don't have a CRM, and there are organizations that don't, I certainly get it, you really will need to develop a foolproof system, which I'm happy to talk to you about, in order to really understand how this works and to move the moves management system forward in order to produce the magic that moves management does. So that brings us to donor cultivation. We've done everything that we need. We've done all our steps. We've got everything in our database. In our CRM, we now know what direction to take for each individual donor. We know our goals. Donor cultivation, and this is truly where moves management happens. So the next question I know all of you are asking is, what are moves? What exactly are moves? Moves are deliberate, they're planned out, they're donor-centric. Again, they're deliberate, planned out, donor-centric interactions with your prospects that are going to do several things. First and foremost, they're going to really, really help you increase and develop that relationship that your major donor has with your organization. Crucial. That comes to affinity that we spoke about earlier. Also, very significantly, it's going to increase the relationship that the donor has with a development professional. We all know the adage, people give to people, not to organizations. Yes, they give to organizations, we know that as well, but it's because of the interactions they're having with you as development professionals that really help get them across that finish line, which means a gift. It's really going to help you increase the understanding of your donor. And when you understand your donor, you're able to speak to them better, you're able to understand what makes them tick, and it means you're able to hone in a far more strategic way when you do your solicitation. And of course, it's going to advance your organization's strategies and goals for each individual donor. You may realize that this donor has the capacity over time to increase their gift from $25,000 to $250,000 by taking a multi-year approach to moves management. Moves management, by the way, it says it very clearly there, should be as absolutely personal as possible. You want to create that personal relationship because that's really where a lot of the magic happens. And again, I've mentioned the word individual and individually multiple times already. They are honed in on each individual donor. It's not one size fits all. And again, they're planned from start to finish. They're planned before, they're planned after, and they're absolutely crucial from that perspective. And the ultimate goal is that they lead to solicitation. So let's take a look at what a number of possible moves are. And I want to make clear that this list is absolutely not exhaustive. So some of the things that you can do, I'll give you a couple of seconds to read what's on here and for me to take a drink of water. Meet them for lunch, meet them for dinner, meet them for coffee. Ask your donors for advice. Donors love that. Again, be aware, very often if you're asking for advice, you kind of have to take that advice. So that's something you have to be careful of. But again, something that a lot of donors love. There's that old adage in fundraising, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. Invite them to an event, ask them to host an event in their home, a reception of sorts. Give them a sneak peek into an upcoming event. Mail them a copy of your annual report, your impact report. If there's an article that you see in a magazine or a newspaper that you know will talk to them based on a recent conversation, send it to them with a handwritten note. It really is amazing what a handwritten note can do. Send them personalized emails. Don't send them, your MailChimp or constant contact emails. Sometimes you want to send them a personalized email as well. Invite them to serve on a host committee. Invite them to your board. So really, there are so many different options that you can really talk to your donors about getting involved. And these are really these connections that you're making on an ongoing basis with your donors that help you reach that ultimate goal of solicitation. Okay, another big question people often ask me is, how many moves are really appropriate? And the answer to that is really in our system. The system has ranked our donors already. We made it clear already, the higher the score, the better your moves need to be, the more moves you need to have, the more in-person and more personal those need to be. Something that I always like doing, those donors or those with prospects with higher scores, let's say from 75 to 100, they have earned between 8 and 12 moves over the course of a year. Donors who are, let's say, in the 50 to 75 on our moves management score, 6 to 8. That's not carved in stone. It could be 9, it could be 10, it could be 5. And then donors who are scoring between 25 and 50, there certainly are important donors, probably I would say even from 0 to 50, but you're not necessarily giving them the same attention that you're giving to the donors who are scoring closer to 100. Again, which I think this is this part of it I think is fairly obvious. Now, pre-planning your moves is beyond crucial. Absolutely beyond crucial, because the goal of it is to map out those moves so that you really go on autopilot, that you don't necessarily have to think. Yes, you're going to be tweaking it from month to month. There are sometimes changes that need to be made, but your Google Sheet is fantastic for tracking all those moves for you, but really keeping this as much on autopilot as humanly possible. So what I'd like to do now is I want to show you 2 examples of 2 prospects. This is, I hope, will give you a better feel for how the moves management system works and can be used. Our 2 prospects are none other than Warren Buffett and Elon Musk. So you'll notice that Warren Buffett has a moves management score of 60, and Elon Musk has a score of 70. It turns out Elon Musk has greater capacity than Warren Buffett. He scored an extra 10 points. That's why he goes on there as a 70. So you'll notice as well that we've already decided who the solicitors are. Michael Kaplan will be soliciting Warren Buffett, and Ryan Hyman, that happens to be me, will be soliciting Elon Musk. Why me? Because we realized Elon Musk is South African. I'm South African, formerly. Therefore, we feel that connection to Elon Musk will be stronger coming from me. Doesn't have to be me, but it will be stronger coming from me. And there are multiple other considerations that you want to consider. We have our goal in mind. We're going to be asking Mr. Buffett for $5,000, and we're going to be asking Mr. Musk for $10,000. Obviously, this is a little bit made up. Don't tell them. Again, I think we would be asking them for far more significant gifts if this were real. We're also considering the methods that we're communicating with them. We know that Mr. Buffett, he scores a score of 60. His financial goal isn't massive. We feel that a Zoom connection, for the most part, is more than adequate. But with Mr. Musk, we want to go bigger. A home visit is important. Crucially important, we're looking at our strategy. Strategy is really that project or campaign, as I mentioned before, that speaks to each individual donor. Warren Buffett's the Oracle of Omaha, investment genius. We want to present him with the investment club that our organization or our school has, because this is something we know will speak to him. Elon Musk is a tech genius. Guess what? We're going to promote STEAM to him, because that's what we feel will make sense. The next thing is we're going to be looking at a solicitation partner. Again, be aware, each of these donors is important. Each of these donors is valuable. We want to show them how much we appreciate them and how seriously we take them. So we're going to be bringing Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of Chase. He's going to be coming along to Warren Buffett because they speak the same language. We decided again to go on the South African route. We're bringing Nelson Mandela. We may have to resurrect him, but we're going to be bringing him along to meet with Mr. Musk. And then we start moving on to our month-by-month progress and mapping in order to determine exactly what steps we're going to be taking. So you'll notice on here, each individual donor, Mr. Buffett and Mr. Musk, each have slightly different moves. Some of them are the same, but some of them are different. So in February, we're going to be sending them both their impact report. Handwritten note, very, very important. By the way, we don't know why, but for some reason, psychologically, blue ink makes a difference. Absolutely should be doing that. In March, there's St. Patrick's Day, there's Purim. Send them baskets. Again, these are major donors. You want to send them what makes sense. Now, a bigger donor, you're going to maybe send a bigger basket. Somebody who's a smaller donor, a smaller prospect, not necessarily going to be spending the same amount of money, but you still want to show them the love. And again, as you go through the process, as you see month by month, you'll notice in June, there's the gala. Both of them are being invited to that. Both are getting a personal call inviting them to the gala. So there are no other necessarily moves surrounding that. You'll notice as well that we're going to be soliciting Mr. Buffett in October, and we're soliciting Elon Musk in November. Why? Because we've made a decision as we've looked through our moves that this is what is needed in order to close the gift with these individual donors. October is the time for Warren Buffett. We know that with Elon Musk's birthday in October, he's not going to be focused. He's going on vacation. Who knows? November is the time to solicit them. So again, those are some things to think about. And what this does is really gives you that overall snapshot of each individual move. And again, you're going to have not 2 names on your list. You're going to have 150, 200, you may have 50, you may only have 75. The numbers, as I said, are going to differ depending on each of your organizations. But this is something that's crucial. And what this does, it helps you go on absolute autopilot from start to finish. Okay, something else that we need to do is we need to move our moves into tasks. And what tasks are is we're utilizing our CRM or any other system that you have. You could use your cell phone for reminders. It's a little bit cumbersome. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. A CRM theoretically should be able to do this for you. But if not, you must, as I said, come up with a good reminder system because, as I said, you want this to be on autopilot. You want this to just happen naturally so that 1st of the month, 5th of the month, whatever the date is that makes sense for you and for that individual donor, it comes up for you. Also, you want to be careful. You can't have, if you have 50 donors in your portfolio, you can't have 50 tasks all on the same day. Those tasks really need to be spread out over the course of the month. So again, that's something else that you must factor in, because if you don't have those reminders, these donors, these prospects are going to fall through the cracks, and your move management system isn't going to work as effectively, if at all. So we started prospecting, we started our system. We've got to keep track with oversights, looking at who our donors are. It's a little bit of a mystery who this particular prospect is, Mr. Arthur Conan Doyle, I think the middle name is. But you'll notice here that each month there are notes in the CRM about what the moves were that took place. So Mr. Doyle's birthday was in September. We sent him a handwritten birthday card. Tells you exactly what we did. In December, we met him for lunch at Pat's, a wonderful restaurant in Los Angeles. If you're ever there, absolutely go. But we took Mr. Doyle to lunch at Pat's, and we discussed a program that we were going to be talking to him about, which is again part of the solicitation process. At that point, we may have solicited him, we may not have. But we're putting all our notes into our system so we understand exactly what happened with each donor. That helps us keep track of everybody in a very, very meticulous way. The next step in the moves management system is solicitation. I'm not going to go into too much detail now because the reality is that solicitation is literally an entire webinar in and of itself where I discuss the art and science of solicitations. So we're not really going to go into much detail about this, but let's make the assumption you have effectively solicited Mr. Buffett for 5,000 and Mr. Musk for 10,000. Great job, guys. Really fantastic job. So our next step that comes into place is stewardship. And this cannot be neglected any way, shape, or form. It is possibly the most important component of moves management. It really is, because what this does is you're starting to recultivate that or continue that relationship for the next 12 months. Okay. And what you want to do during stewardship is you want to literally shower your donors with love and gratitude. These are the people that made your organization, that make your organization tick. It makes your organization happen. And really, I got to be honest about this. In your bottom left-hand corner, it says it clearly. Excellent stewardship is the best cultivation for the next gift. If you steward your donors right, you treat them right, with respect, keeping them involved, letting them know what's going on, showing them the love, that will cultivate them for the next gift. It really will. And one of the things I want to encourage you is when you do thank them, think out of the box. Think out of the box. Donors love that. Love that. Something to be aware of. Some of these donors are really, really major philanthropists. So it's really tough to think about gifts for them. I did a gift for a donor a number of years ago. It was a $5 million capital campaign gift. We solicited, we closed that gift. I was frankly very, very proud. It was at the time, the largest solicitation I've ever done in my career. It took us about 2 years to get to that point. It was a really tough solicitation, but really fantastic at the end. So what I did, once the gift closed, it was, as I said, it was for a capital campaign gift. I created a lucite block with a laser engraved model or representation of the particular building that this donor had donated to the school that I was working at the time. In fact, we even had the donor's name engraved onto this building in this block. There was this light thing underneath. It shone the light through. It looked gorgeous. It cost us probably, I think, around $300 to produce. And let me tell you, it went over so well with that particular donor. It was absolutely incredible. Think out of the box. Your stewardship counts. This is where your donors keep coming back to you from year after year because you've used that moves management system that brought them to that point, cultivating those relationships over the long term. So we finished our moves management system, and now we start all over again, which means we have to score everyone again. You're going to be adding new prospects, people who may have donated to your organization. You're going to be adding them in. They may not have been prospects before, but they're now new prospects. If I could ask everyone to please mute. You're also going to be removing your lower scoring prospects because, again, you've scored everybody again. A donor who hasn't given for whatever reason, or they gave a smaller gift, when you rescore them, they may fall off your list. At the same time, a donor who's given a little bit more may be added to your list or move up in your scoring process. But don't fight the process. This is designed in this way to really help you think through this and literally be on autopilot when it comes to these types of relationships. You don't want to be on autopilot, of course, when you're actually working with that donor. But again, this is what you're going to be doing. Sorting your scores. You're going to be setting new goals. You import your data back into your CRM. You plan your individual moves for each individual prospect. And again, let the cultivation begin yet again. One of the things I want to mention, which I think is so important, is that I believe you've got to get buy-in from your development team in order for moves management to really be as successful as possible. You want their ongoing input. They're the ones, as they're speaking to prospects, they're putting the information into the system. When a gift goes out and the prospect sends a letter or an email saying, thank you for the gift, thank you for the impact report, thank you for the phone call, thank you for lunch, whatever it may be, you're putting it into the CRM. As we know, garbage in to a CRM, garbage out. On the flip side, gold in to your CRM, and you will have success in major ways. I want to encourage you, lead by example. Show your development team how this works. If they have questions, answer the questions for them, walk them through the process. But you've got to emphasize how important the system is because honestly, it really and truly works. That really, ladies and gentlemen, is moves management. we identify our prospect, okay, as we said over here. We're giving them a score. We're setting goals for them. We're putting that information into the database so that we can follow what our moves are and task them for us on an ongoing basis. And then we're cultivating, and as I said, starting that process over again the following year. And that, as I said, really is moves management. Before I open to questions, I just want to bring to everybody's attention, I'm going to be doing my next webinar is going to be taking place on Thursday, February 23rd. From 12 to 12:45 p.m. Eastern Time. I cannot wait to bring Sarah Weintraub onto the webinar to talk about wowing them with your stories. Sarah is a masterful storyteller, and I know that all of you and all of your colleagues, you've got to invite your colleagues as well. I know that you're absolutely going to benefit from it and enjoy, and I absolutely encourage you to attend. I'm going to be sending out an email about that a little bit closer to the time, probably in my February, almost certainly in my February newsletter. So again, I really want to thank you for joining me. I am going to stay on, for the next 10, 15 minutes or as long as necessary, but feel free to reach out. This is my cell phone number. Reach out anytime. More than welcome to email me. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I strongly encourage you to follow me and RH Strategic. There's a lot of other information on there. But again, I want to thank you. I do see